This podcast is rated E for explicit and by category of true crime contains language and descriptions of crimes not suitable for young or sensitive listeners. Between the lines of truth and mystery lies plausible theories. In this week's episode, you'll hear from Joseph's father, Joe Smedley. The ladies take on what was originally thought to be outside theories, and the pieces start falling together. This is part 5 of Justice for Joseph, Confidential Informant, and you're listening to The Cold Case Chronicles.
I know your secret, I know the truth, I know your secrets and I'm telling on you.
He was hit real hard by the divorce of his mother and I, and that occurred when he was in his maybe 10 or 11 years old.
Okay.
And he was very close to his mom, and that didn't sit with him too well.
Right.
And I kind of became the bad guy, and so that was the beginning of our estrangement.
Were you in contact with him when he went away to IU?
Actually, I was not. That estrangement occurred over a period of a few years, and when he was living with me, and he decided that he did not want to. It's kind of a typical, to some extent. He's 17 years old and wanted to go and come as he pleased.
Right.
I was letting him know that, I'm his dad, and that as long as he was in the house, we were in the house together, I was still in charge.
Right. My house, my rules.
Yeah. Now, complicating this issue was by that time I had remarried.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not care that much for his stepmother.
Right.
And so she was not she was not his mother. And so she was not the most endearing and affectionate type of person.
Mm-hmm.
And so that added some complication to the problem.
Right.
So he decided that he just wanted to leave the house. And he packed up and left. I did not put him out. He just decided that's what he wanted to do. And he had a friend of his pick him up. And that essentially was the end of the relationship. I never saw him in terms of interacting with him after that, before he even got to Bloomington. There was a period of several years. And I was always hoping, I loved my son the whole time. It didn't matter. And I thought he was a bright kid, always respected him, but I also, as his father, demanded respect in return. He was headstrong and decided that that's not what he wanted to do, so he left. There was always hope against hope that at some point we would, reconnect.
Right.
And meanwhile, I was, in another relationship and trying to make that go. And I still had his baby sister, Giselle, my youngest daughter, she and I are still together now. I've made a divorce. His stepmother, it's been a couple of years. And Giselle and I are still together. She's 18 now and on her way to college. And she and I are, I'm single father with her. But that's what he decided to do. And I was I guess one of the reasons why I didn't, I felt so bad upon his death was that, as a parent, I'm sure you can imagine, the the guilt and remorse.
But you could not have possibly known, and he probably wouldn't have been receptive at that point in his life for you to reach out.
Well, that was what I was feeling, right? But at the same time, I didn't expect him to die.
Exactly.
So it was just a major traumatic situation for me. Not just the death, but the fact that you always have that. I wish I could have, should have.
Absolutely.
That kind of thing. So that's the main thing, one of the main things that I caught. But anyway, to answer your question, that was what was going on, and that I was real proud, even though I was not a part of his life. I was so proud that he managed to get into college and go through his freshman and enter his sophomore year. So I was always hopeful that at some point we could reunite.
Now, how did you find out about him missing?
One of my professional colleagues sent me a message and said something about, did you know that Joseph had gone missing or something like that? And I said, no. Then I started trying to, find out the details. And then the details emerged in the press.
When he was found at Griffey Lake, did the police contact you, or who contacted you then?
I think what happened was that the campus or Bloomington police contacted the police department chaplain in Noblesville, where I live. And the chaplain and another officer came by my house because they had to make the official notification and told me.
And did they tell you at that point that they thought it was suicide, or did they suggest any reason for death?
They didn't suggest any reason other than he had been found drowned.
And when you found out that they had listed as a suicide, what was your initial reaction?
My initial reaction was that was bogus because that was not his. He was a kid that loved life. He was, he's not perfect. None of us are, but he loved life and he had plans.
Right, and I feel the same way. Someone who's making plans for the future and making plans even for the week don't necessarily show the characteristics of someone suicidal.
Right.
Now, I've heard that he was really close to Giselle, and
yes,
that was kind of an issue Vivian and I were talking about, where she said, he would have reached out to her before he would have reached out to Vivian in that last message because he was so much closer to her.
Yeah, he was close to Giselle.
He had not contacted her at all, had he?
No, he had not contacted her. In fact, if he had tried to reach out to her, then I probably would have known about it, and I probably would have tried to maybe seize that opportunity to maybe try to talk with him, but he did not.
How did it come into play that you guys felt like it could have been a confidential informant situation?
A couple of things that really kind of raised a red flag for me with the Bloomington police. First of all, my former wife and I we did what we call a fairly thorough investigation. We found out that the person that pulled him out of the water was the head of the narcotics unit of the Bloomington Police Department. And we actually had some conversation with that guy. And one of the first things out of his mouth was, without me asking, was that he didn't see any evidence of foul play on the body, and that he was he was there when they took his clothes off, and after they brought him in, I guess, to the morgue or wherever it is they took him. And then he said something that I also thought was odd. He said, I would recommend that you have him cremated as soon as possible because he's been in the water for the better part of 5 days, and the body is in pretty bad shape.
Which should never be suggested to anyone, how to bury or cremate their child. Do you think that it was kind of called at that moment at the scene that they were like, we're going to call this a suicide? Because to me, it seems so obvious that more should be investigated with anyone with a bag on them that's weighting them down. That just screams homicide to me.
Yeah, and by the way, I thank you for mentioning that because that's the other part, because he didn't tell me that at first.
Huh.
He didn't say that. He just said, he just said what I just mentioned. So I didn't find out about that later until we went down and talked with the Bloomington police. So my wife and I went down and had a meeting with the police department and the coroner, the woman that was coroner at the time, who I found out, by the way, was not really, although she had the title of coroner, she was not really qualified as a, coroner needs to be an MD,
right,
with the medical training, pathology, medical training, and she was not that. So I think, and in fact, I think there was another coroner or somebody else that reported to her that actually conducted and supervised the autopsy. So, and she's the one that made the initial call of suggesting that it was suicide. But let me get back to answering your question. So here's the situation. What my former wife and I, we met and interviewed with the Bloomington campus police chief. And she told us that she was aware that Joseph had been dealing or had been, selling a little bit of marijuana to his friend. But she said that they did not think that he was a quote unquote drug dealer. Right. Okay. That this was his primary occupation. They thought, but they did get a report from somewhere that he was, selling a few, maybe some few drugs to his buddies in that fraternity or somewhere. Okay. So then my cousin who lives in Chicago, we're very close, she called me up while we were talking one day, and she said, I just saw something on the news that I think you need to be aware of. And I said, what is it? 60 Minutes did a program on how police in these campus communities and small towns and even in large cities, when they arrest a kid or when they're in a situation where maybe kids in the car or smoking some weed or with another kid, or they find them and they bust them, they immediately start to intimidate them and say to them, your campus, your college career is doomed, but we may be able to save you if you tell us where you got the drugs from. Okay? And so then what they do, the kids are, of course, scared to death, and they don't want their parents to find out, and they don't want their college career to be ended. And this has happened to dozens of boys and girls, college boys and girls around the country. And so what they do is they make them become an informant. But to become an informant, even a professional informant, is dangerous. Right. So then if you force a kid to become an informant that has not even had any idea of what to do, then that's basically sending the kid's death warrant.
Joe and Amy's conversation would continue for over an hour. Some of it entailed other theories and mismatches in information that's available. The bottom line is a father who deeply regrets the distance with his son and a lost chance at reconciliation. We may hear more from Joe later. However, the crew drives on, digging deeper into each avenue.
Joseph's father had an FBI investigation done about his case. And one of the things he mentioned in the FBI investigation was that he felt like Joseph might have been a criminal informant. At first, I thought, well, that's kind of a stretch. Like, what is that based on? So the more I read about this case, the more I thought, well, maybe, it's possible. It is possible. Right. He had filed this complaint, and in the complaint, it mentioned to them that the university police department told him Joseph's roommate was selling drugs, and at that time, Joseph had taken over the business, so to speak, and had started selling small quantities of marijuana. Well, there was no document, there was no indication in the files, in the police records, that Joseph had been arrested for selling drugs. That brings up kind of a point that, well, was that legit? Like, did they have him mixed up with someone else? Because we know from our earlier episodes that his name had been mixed up with someone else, with Jill, and so maybe he was mixed up with someone else. There is a case in particular that we're going to talk about, which it sounds extremely similar to Joseph's, and it makes me think that it definitely could be this. Now, the death certificate, well, the FBI says they didn't find anything. In fact, their exact words were that there were no indications of drug investigations on or related to him, and there were no indications that he was being used as a source of any kind. He had never been booked into the Monroe County Jail.
That sounds like something the FBI would say when they're investigating
someone. I know, anything at all. Like, we have no...
There was nothing.
Nothing at all.
Are there aliens? No. They say no.
We have no evidence that there are aliens.
Yeah, we have no evidence of absolutely anything. But they said that although the death investigation did not rule out homicide entirely, the evidence did indicate the most likely cause of death was suicide.
That's interesting.
Isn't it? Because if that's the case, then why was suicide on the death certificate?
And what evidence are they basing this off of? I ask this every episode, but seriously.
What evidence?
Like, what evidence?
Why suicide and not homicide? And why just not put undetermined if they truly can't make a decision on it?
Yeah, it should have been listed could not be determined instead of suicide. If the FBI saw enough information in there that they said that it could have been, then it could not have been suicide. That's how I feel about it. The other thing that's interesting when it comes to narcotics is that it was a narcotics sergeant who was the lead investigator, and he was the supervising agent on Joseph's case. He was at the scene when the body was recovered. He was present at the autopsy, and he was the only point of contact for the family.
Why? But why narcotics? Do they not have a homicide department?
Yes, they do. But
is it so? I could see this two ways, because he is an informant and the narcotics guy wants to make sure that he knows his guy is dead, or it could be it's Bloomington police and they're racist, or it's a combination of both.
Oh, that's come up recently.
Yeah.
Bloomington period.
Or it might be a combination of both, but that's so if there's a homicide department, why wouldn't they take over any suspicious death? Isn't that like the rule in Indiana?
Well,
if no one like visibly saw you die that was a healthcare worker.
Well, I would think that narcotics would be their own unit, and unless there was anything related to drugs, they wouldn't be involved at all.
Yeah, why would they even be there?
Well, even if they suspected it, I think they'd bring narcotics in just to get like their opinion at least and say, have you heard of this happening before in cases of
narcotic diversion or anything, and then they could say like, oh, we know this case from a while back. There's some similarities, like we'll take a look into it.
Yeah, but there was no, to my knowledge, there was no similarities. There was nothing to point them in that direction at that point. So even if they came in and said, hey, this kid, was known to sell drugs, he would come in and say, well, nothing was found on him. We think it was suicide, so he should peace out. And then they should have someone else come in. I don't know. It just seems weird that a narcotics agent was especially the point of contact from that point on.
This is how it happened in my head. They found a dead body and they said, hurry, call narcotics.
Yeah.
And then that's what happened from then on out.
Well, and then the narcotics agent was actually there for the autopsy, like to see it.
That only happens on like SVU. And they're not even there. They go later and they're like bothering that poor lady.
Yeah. And just a reminder, like, as soon as they found the body, they never treated it like a homicide from the get-go because, as we've mentioned, they threw everything into one bag. They never, they didn't put everything in its own bag for evidence, and they never canvassed. I feel like they didn't really canvass the area. I mean, they probably did a little bit, but they just put everything in one bag. I mean, I feel like that from the get-go is they never suspected homicide, which why not? And we've pointed out, we know he was found face up, which they say is like very uncommon in suicide. If you're committing suicide in water, you're going to be face down, right?
Yeah, well, except for the fact that you have 66 pounds of rocks strapped to you. And in 2015, IU had 17 informants on their campus.
Wow.
Yes.
Like, I know that is
there was an article where they talked about all the different colleges and how many informants they had and what an outrage people, because these are kids.
It's dangerous.
Yeah.
They're kids whose brains are not completely developed. No matter what you want to say about it, they're just children.
Also, I think I remember something from a psychology class. Isn't that a part of your brain development that where you like learn how to overcome addiction? So like 22-year-olds like drink a lot to like a problem, but then for some reason, like at a certain age, almost everyone comes out of that, and that's part of your brain development.
Well, besides the fact that you have police officers that go to school and learn how to do things like this, how to become confidential informants, how to deal with things like this. And then you're going to take a kid who may have been caught with a couple of joints in his pocket, and then you're going to have him out there selling cocaine to who even knows what kind of people. It's just, it doesn't make sense. You're putting people in danger who don't need to be in danger.
And especially when it's like mostly weed. Like
Right. And then it turns into other things that we are going to take
all
a
right,
look at
Barbara
as well.
Bush, weed's the gateway drug.
It's the gateway drug when you're an informant. I'll tell you that.
I just looked up how much 66 pounds of actual rocks would be. And it's 2 of those like landscape bags of river rock is about 50 pounds.
Yeah, it's very heavy.
That's so much.
So when I used bricks initially, I could not get 66 pounds of bricks in a standard backpack. I had to use an old army rucksack so I could get to 66 pounds.
And he's bigger than Joseph. So I don't know how.
There's no way.
No.
That
someone
absolutely
did that.
no. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, another college kid, Andrew Sadek. I don't want to mess that up, but I think I just did.
Well, let's just spell it out for everyone.
Sadek. Sadek. There was a 60 Minutes that you can actually look up on YouTube that was on December 6, 2015, which occurred just months after Joseph's death. His death happened in 2014, which was the year before Joseph.
Where was that at?
North Dakota. He was made to be a confidential informant just because he got caught selling a small amount of marijuana, and they brought him in. You can find his full interrogation tape on YouTube, and you can see how they were like telling him, you're facing up to 40 years in prison. And, he was scared shitless.
Right now, I would be like, I
And
will
what was
go
he in
do whatever
trouble
you
for?
want.
He's selling marijuana.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he could have
And-
gotten a lawyer and probably not got nothing.
Right. But he was terrified. There's no record. They tell you there's going to be no record. And the reason they don't get a lawyer is because they're not under arrest.
Right.
They bring them in. They don't put them under arrest. They don't read them their Miranda rights because they don't have to, because they don't put them under arrest. They just bring them
Talk
in
to
and then
them.
give them this option before putting them under arrest so they don't have to read them their rights. So they give them an option and then they tell them, hey, if you call your parents, the deal's off the table. You can't tell anyone.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
So shady.
So these kids are terrified. They're going to be kicked out of school. They're going to go to prison. They're going to be in trouble with their parents. I mean, all these things that going on through their mind.
Also, 40 years for selling marijuana, and what do we do? 15 years for rape?
Oh, or murder. I mean,
Yeah.
people get 7 years for murder.
And then, yeah, I still would today, as almost 40, say, yep, give me the wire now.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and then they make them sell. It's not like they make one sell. They make them go and they sell to 3, 4, 10 people. And they're basically creating criminals because they go to their friends who don't usually sell weed or whatever they're trying to get. And they say, hey, I just need a little. Can you sell me some? And then they will, because you're friends or your frat brothers or whatever.
Right.
And then they'll sell you some. And then now they're a dealer. So now it's a felony.
Man, there are probably like 15 people that I bought drugs from in college that
Yeah.
could have been an informant.
Yeah. And you just don't know. And
Only one of them was an actual dealer, too.
I'm definitely getting the drugs into your house. That's for sure. So this kid, he had done everything. He did everything that he was supposed to do. And he had one buy that he still had to do. Like, he every day he had to call in. He had to do all these things that, it was ridiculous. And he was still trying to go to college and get his degree. And then one buy was all he had left. Then he disappeared. His parents tried to get in touch with him. They couldn't get in touch with them. They went to campus. They did all these things, and they had no idea he was an informant.
Were they arresting these kids that were buying from him?
So they wait a while to arrest so that they don't
immediately associate?
Yes, they don't
But
associate
then
it with the.
Anybody, like if you're in a group of friends or live in a dorm and you're like, you went to jail? I went to jail. Who'd you buy from? Who'd you
Right.
buy from?
Oh, yeah.
Even if it's like long, like
Yeah, you're going to figure it out. You're definitely going to figure it out. And then his body was discovered in a river near the campus with a backpack weighted down with rocks with a strap tied together across his chest.
Doesn't that sound familiar?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
The only other person I know that exact same thing happened to is Joseph. But the difference is he had a gunshot to his head. The gun was never found, and the police suggested that they thought it was suicide. Yeah.
Yep, I got a gunshot in my head and
Yeah.
then managed to drown myself.
To drown myself. They think that he somehow put the rocks in the backpack.
But they just
Where is
proved
the
that
gun?
quickly, right?
No.
Shut
No.
the front door.
The parents
They
are
left
still,
it as a suicide?
Parents are still fucking fighting for this. I swear.
That's
Okay.
insane.
It's insane.
Where's the
And-
gun?
Okay. And on top of it, it must have gone down in the river.
Was the gun
He threw
pointed
it
up?
probably.
Yeah, he probably
After,
threw
but
it
I mean,
after
after
the
he
You
shot
fact.
shoot
himself in the
yourself
face.
in the head. After you shoot yourself, you're going to fling it up in the air and it's going to magically go far enough
And
away that
disappear.
it would never be found.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then you're going to strap a backpack on because you probably wouldn't do that beforehand because you'd be stuck underwater.
Yeah. How do you do that? How does that happen?
So-
I don't know. I don't know how his parents have gained composure through all this. And then his body was found on the line, the state line, and so no state wants any part of it.
Between North Dakota and Minnesota.
Have they
And-
called in the FBI or can they?
Yes.
Okay.
But nobody wants to deal with it.
Well,
But the
someone needs
FBI is
to.
like,
Yes.
well,
Yeah,
it's just a college
they
kid.
did. Yeah, it's suicide. It
Did they
looks
say
like
the same
suicide.
thing? Did they
Yes.
say That they said for Joseph,
Yes,
though?
they
There's
all
no
are
evidence?
saying the same. There's no evidence that anything was wrong. But he didn't have a suicide note or anything. And so they're just saying, there's just nothing to go on. And I'm just like,
You got to be fucking kidding
I
me.
know. It's
Because
And
they
he
don't want
didn't
to
own a
take
gun.
no, he didn't own a gun.
they don't want to take the blame that their actions and their intimidation caused him to be murdered.
Right. And they didn't even find out. They still didn't tell them that he was a criminal informant until they hired a private investigator, and that private investigator uncovered it and told them the information. They
Then what?
still
Then what?
didn't tell
Then
them.
what did the police say?
And then they admitted it.
I'm mind blown.
I'm sorry.
know.
They should have said that right away after he was
Absolutely.
found.
No, even when he was missing, I feel like they should have said it. They should have said, okay, this might contribute, might have
why
contributed.
he's gone or why he got killed. He was doing some side work for
Because
us,
they
but-
weren't even really looking for him because they thought he had run away
Mhm.
because he was trying to get away from his responsibility.
Maybe in the beginning, but not when you have one left and then they're going to let you go. But
right.
they probably would have roped him into more, but
So not
Oh my
saying anything
God,
makes the
yes.
police look even more shady.
Yes, and they have a Facebook page. His parents do, and they update it really consistently, and
What's
it
called?
is.
You know what? When I first heard the criminal informant theory, I was like, that's crazy. But then after hearing
Yeah.
that guy's story,
I
anything's possible at this point.
still want
It was
Joseph's
aliens, I don't
family
know.
and his family to get together and just compare some notes.
It's called Justice for Andrew Sadek, and you have to join it because there is a lot of information, and they're constantly updating, and they've had some legislation passed, and a lot of things have come out of it, but no kind of justice, nothing like that. So I don't know, it's very.
Do they still have that private investigator that helping them? Or
I don't know if
because
he's.
we need to get him to look at our case too, and then
Right.
maybe see if he sees any similarities or something.
Yeah, and the reason that he found, but here's the thing, the reason that he found anything was because he was able to get his phone, and he went through and he never erased anything on his phone. So he had like 2 years worth of messages. So he was able to see the messages from the officers and all the drug deals and all this stuff, and he saw in there where he felt really bad about all the stuff he was doing because, it's like you feel guilty. You're setting up most of your friends, a lot of these people. So you feel bad. And so he could see all that. So he knew what was going on.
If I ever ask you guys to buy drugs, you know why. Just
Yeah.
say no.
Just say no. And, with Joseph, they won't release that. They won't release his phone and they won't release his laptop, which just puts more suspicion to the police because why won't they release that stuff? Too similar. It's very, very similar. I just don't understand.
I mean, everything but the gunshot. I guess.
Yeah, the gunshot.
That would have given. I bet it would have. That would have given it away, right?
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
they couldn't shoot Joseph, but
It's too similar and too soon. And
what they do with
Not even that
what they
far
do with
away.
I
Andrew's
know.
body? Was he cremated?
I don't know.
Because Joseph, remember the officer talked the dad into getting him cremated.
You want to cremate him right
Yes.
away.
Which I don't even know if we've talked about that yet, but what if he? need
We
to
did
know.
on the
He
first
probably
Yeah.
does.
episode.
Yeah, we did.
We need to reach out to Andrew's parents and find out more about that. I'll do that for sure. He's not the only one. He is the only one I could find that was found in similar circumstances. But Rachel Hoffman, she was actually one of the first that caused a huge deal, and that was in Tallahassee. She was caught with marijuana and a few Valium and ecstasy pills, and that was her second marijuana arrest. And she was just selling to friends out of her house. They told her if she didn't become a confidential informant that she was going to spend 4 years in prison. So she signed up and was sent out to her first undercover buy. And the first buy that she was sent out to do was the biggest in Tallahassee's history. Here you have a
fucking
I know. Here you have a
lazy.
college student. She was set out to sell 1,500 ecstasy pills, 1.5 ounce of cocaine, and a handgun.
To a fucking stranger, probably.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And she has a cat. So I love her.
Aw.
So she goes to meet them. They have 20 cops, listening in. She has a wire in her purse and she goes to meet them. Well, the guy gets in her car and makes her drive somewhere else. Well, they lose her. And then they find her. She's been shot 5 times. And they had found the wire in her purse and they had dumped her body in a ditch 50 miles away.
Did they rule it a suicide?
Right? I'm surprised. They paid $2.8 million to her parents, is what they did. So I think they did.
Doesn't make up for it.
It does not make up for losing their daughter, that's for certain.
I can't believe how many criminal informants there are. I felt like that was a movie thing that never happened.
I knew it happened to people that were like
Older.
in the drug trade. Yeah, it's a thing that you think of for the mob. But I mean, you have police officers who look like babies, who look young. Why not use them? Why not use the officers that look young to go into colleges and sell? If that's what you want,
to protect themselves.
Yes, exactly.
Instead of like these vulnerable college kids who are just trying to stay out of trouble. It's the worst.
I know.
That's I don't know how that's legal.
Well,
honestly.
and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
Let's get a bill going.
There is a law that was actually put in for Rachel's case. It's called Rachel's Law, and it requires law enforcement agencies to provide special training for officers who do the recruiting for confidential informants.
Jesus.
But
don't train.
But not even the confidential informants.
It is special training for the officers that recruit them and instruct informants that reduced sentences may not be provided in exchange for their work. And then also allows informants to request a lawyer if they want one, because that wasn't the case before.
Yeah, but you're a college student. You're in trouble for drugs. Do you think you can afford a lawyer? You're terrified. You have the shit scared out of you.
And then they say stuff like, you can ask for a lawyer, but we're going to take your deal away.
Yes.
You'll never get the opportunity.
Exactly what
they
they're
should
saying.
not be able to say that.
Right.
I mean, I'm not writing the law books here, but I think there is a big
well, everybody,
no-no
let's
there.
vote Danny into a lawmaking position.
Yeah, we should run for office for something.
We should.
Oh,
I'm
not
not run
getting
for
it.
county coroner.
I'll run. I got Joey.
No.
Joey could do it.
Yeah, I was saying last night is that my kids have heard so much that I've talked about that they're going to get pulled over to get just a speeding ticket one day, and they'll be like, "I need my attorney." I'm like, always ask for attorneys, but like, I need my attorney, ma'am. I'm just pulling you over because your tail lights out.
I just asked how your
need
day
my attorney.
was.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
going to
my
get
attorney.
17 more cops over there real fast.
After all the shows I've watched about true crime and like how it can go from 0 to 100 so quickly, I'm like, I'm sorry, am I under arrest?
Now, Ole Miss has been in a lot of trouble because they have had a lot of informants, and in fact, their university has been shown to pay $100,000 to the narcotics unit there in the city of Oxford every year. And one of the guys,
what's their endowment thing?
yeah, one of the guys, and they changed his name also for this 60 Minutes episode. He, was same thing. They tell him you can call a lawyer, but this deal's going to be off the table. And one of the first things they asked him was if he could buy meth or heroin on campus. And he told them he couldn't. And the first 8 months or so, he had to call them every single day at the same time. He had to call this guy. And then they listened to one of the phone calls that he had made to him. And the officer says to him, "I don't give a fuck where you're at." And the kid said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "I'll turn this shit in and I'll come and beat the fuck out of you." And the kid said, "Yes, sir." And then the CI says, or the cop says, "Come there. It'll be the last fucking place you ever go in your life." And the kid says, "Yes, sir." And the guy says, "Do you feel me?" And the kid said, 100%. And he said, "It took all I had not to come see you last night." And he said, "Yes, sir." And the guy said, "To hunt you down, but I'm trying to calm down." And the guy said, "I'm just going to let this tape speak for itself." That's what the lawyer said. And I'm just like, what the hell? I mean, it's bad enough to intimidate them and to get them to play this game with their life, but that's just taking it too far.
Yeah.
That's a threat on their life.
Yep.
So this attorney, Ken Coughlin, he is like the attorney for confidential informants in college. He's kind of taken on all of it. And somebody needs to, because Ole Miss wouldn't comment on it. And obviously, universities want drugs off campus. That's a huge issue. But this is just not the way to go about it.
Right.
It's not at all. And we don't know. We don't know if Joseph was involved in drugs. He wasn't on paper involved in drugs. We know there's been people that said that he was making something, possibly
DMT.
Possibly he was making DMT, maybe. And we also know that they were told by IUPD that he was selling. We don't know that because he was never charged. But I know that you can't put 60 pounds of rocks in your backpack and walk 3 miles or walk 3 miles in the dark, then walk 2 miles back down and then walk back 3 miles and then get in the river and put 66 pounds of rocks in your backpack and drown yourself. It just isn't making a lot of sense. And if there wasn't the quote suicide note, I don't know if they would have treated it any differently or not.
Right. And let's remind everyone the suicide note was not a suicide note.
No.
At all. It was, I'm leaving the country, as in, it was a note that I hope nobody finds his body.
Right.
Confidential informant. It's still a theory, but entirely plausible until the Bloomington and IU police departments release their files to the family of Joseph Smedley. More information about Andrew Sadek's case can be found in the 60 Minutes episode available on YouTube and on his family's Justice for Andrew Facebook page. Information on IU's confidential informant use can be found with the Chronicle of Higher Education, and there's a link that we provide at coldcasechronicles.com. Please follow along on social media, Cold Case Chronicles on Facebook and Instagram, and at Cold Case Crew on Twitter. And as always,
have the day you deserve.
Especially if you're withholding information.
I know your secrets and I'm telling on you.